Going to check out the missile site. Ballistic missile. Ooh.
Here we are, not getting shot.
Yeah, you would get shot.
Huh?
You would get shot if you weren't allowed here. We're watching you too, brother.
Kind of muddy on the window there.
1.2 megaton.
Mama? Mama! Mommy! Something with that bee. Audrey, that's always the 1,000 feet. Take a look, Audrey. That'll probably be 7,000 feet.
So they spent, they basically had to,
How does it look?
they had to engineer acoustic absorbing material that didn't exist yet just through these silos, because without them, when the ballistic missile would go off, the sound from it bouncing off the walls would destroy the missile right inside the silo.
Wow.
Yeah. It's so cool.
Mama! Mom?
Yeah. Most of these missiles are just targeted to destroy other missiles on the other side of the planet. They're pawns. They're pawns in the war game of chess. Of course, you got to be careful here. There may be rattlesnakes anywhere. Some kind of geared sliding system. Pretty cool. no idea what this stuff is.
Those are high security sprinkler we use. It's because the wind blows the gate open. We're going to head over just between the basketball court and the corner of the building, and we'll get started. I'll stand in the sun and you guys can stare. Okay, my name is Dale. I'm your interpretive ranger here at the Minuteman Missile National Historic Site. I'll be giving you today's tour. I'll be using interpretive dance. See, that gets them every time. Anyway, welcome. How many people have had, anybody here prior service been in the military before?
Yeah, so does the A-Team know you still have their vehicle?
That's not the A-Team's vehicle. That's actually a Chrysler bailout vehicle. Chrysler went out of business in 1977, 1978. The government bailed them out. The Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard all got Dodge trucks the next year. That's actually a Dodge pickup truck with a Cadillac Gauge armored body on top of it.
Oh, wow.
Okay. They hated it. We'll get into that. So anyway, right now you're standing on top of the Launch Control Center. It's 31 feet underneath you. This is a launch control facility, all right? Does anybody know why we built these things?
Just in case.
What? Deterrence. She's close. Defense and deterrence. Almost the same thing. And the key with deterrence is if you have somebody that you're going to fight or you don't want to fight, you show them your capabilities, right? I'm a black belt. Don't mess with me. You don't mess with the guy that's a black belt, right? So, this was all top secret and nobody knew about it, right? It was all hush-hush. No, not true. This was put in magazines. This was put on TV. We showed it to the Soviets. Why did we do that?
So they wouldn't know you had it.
So we know we had it and we know how it worked, all right? We did it as a deterrent. The reason that showing it to them and so they know how it worked becomes important is, did anybody go in the museum today? Did you see what happened in 1983 with the missile launches?
Yeah.
The Soviets detected 5-minute missiles coming into the United States but did not launch back. Why not?
Because they thought it was odd that there were only 5.
There was only 5. That's not right. And they knew our safeties were so deep it couldn't have been an accident. That's why they stopped. All right? So it was done for deterrence. Why were they put in South Dakota, North Dakota, and all these central United States states? Anybody know?
They're primary targets, and if the Soviets attack us, there's going to be less casualties. Also, there's lots of room.
They couldn't
Actually-
reach the place with their missiles.
Exactly. The Soviet sea-based missiles could not reach this far in when these were built. And we could build a smaller missile and work on our accuracy because we could go over the pole and get closer to the target. If we'd have tried to shoot around, we'd had to go twice the distance. The rocket would have had to be much bigger. Okay. So, to move missiles, we had to have what?
Not about
Ops carts
casualties.
to get them across the prairie, right?
Bummer.
Vehicle.
Vehicles and an interstate highway. Why do we build interstate highways? They were built to move troops and material in case of attack, right? Originally, they were also set aside to use to evacuate civilians in case of attack. The original plans called for defensive bunkers underneath the overpasses to put you in case of an attack to protect you. We didn't get those. We got rest areas, much more helpful. All right.
Bummer.
So, we also have to have communications. Originally, they had a high-frequency antenna back here on this pad. They tore it down in 1972 because they didn't know where it could be a museum. They tore it. This high-frequency antenna, you notice it's not in the middle, it's up to the side. There's manhole covers around it. Well, that's in case it gets knocked down by the prairie wind or nearby vegetation. There's a switch downstairs. There's explosive bolts underneath. We can pop a new one back up. We can do that 5 times. We over here, this is not the missile nose cone. Everybody seems to think it is. That's a ultra high frequency antenna. It's a line of sight antenna. That would communicate with an aircraft that was called Looking Glass. Looking Glass flew a series of airplanes 24 hours a day, 365 days a year for 29 years. They flew from the SAC base in Omaha, Nebraska. Once they got up to 35,000 feet, they could see all 1,050 missiles in all the launch facilities utilizing those antennas. If you've been over to the missile, you saw there's one over there too. My grandpa had one of these in the backfield, and as a kid I could see the missile sticking out of the ground. No, it's the antenna. All right. So, the last way they would have communicated with you guys, I'm going to have a little fun with you, and I apologize in advance. Back here, buried over the hill up here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Turn your heads to say back over here, buried in the hill, is the buried in the hill. Ultra low frequency antenna. That uses the entire Earth as an antenna. It's what the Navy uses to communicate with submerged submarines. final communication system was the Higgs cable. You saw a piece at the museum, the Hardin Intersite Communication System. I'll put a piece in your hands down here and we'll show you what it really looked like. So, they're standing on top of the launch capsule. That was 2 officers. They came here for 24 hours. They went straight down there, did their tour down there, and left. The top side, the launch control facility, was run by 8 Air Force enlisted personnel. Let's talk about that as we walk this way. Everybody would have entered through this door. The officers would have gone through the security office and straight down in the launch control center. The enlisted men would have gone, and women would have gone into the facility and proceeded to their work areas. We're going to go on in there and see how they live. So they have 2 water tanks that they would fill up on alternating days. They fill them up out of this 3,000 foot deep well over here. That's awful deep, isn't it? They wanted a pure water source. All right, so the senior person that was here, highest ranking person, was in charge. They were called the facility manager. Now before we go in there, I'll talk about this real quick. This is a living museum. In 1991, the START Treaty set this facility aside to be kept as a museum. The Soviets also got to keep one. They lost theirs. Right? How do you lose a nuclear missile silo?
You lose the country.
You lose the country. It was actually in the Ukraine. When the empire dissolved, the Ukrainians got the tour, the Russians did not. They still come here to see ours. We still have ours.
Bummer.
In 1993, February 21st, this was still an active launch control facility with a missile in it. On February 22nd, it was a National Historic Site. They knew it was going to be a museum. They left their things behind. Their books are in there, their magazines are in there. Okay, there's actually garbage in their bedroom closets, or excuse me, their bedroom garbage cans. It's cataloged. We can't throw it away. We can't touch it. It is National Historical Item.
Wow.
So please, everything was made by the lowest bidder. The paint's not the best in the world. Okay. It is dated original to 93. We have replaced the carpet. You are allowed to touch the carpet and the doorknobs. I get to touch the light fixtures. That's it. So if you see me touching anything, sometimes I forget and lean on things, please feel free to yell at me. If I see you leaning or touching on anything, I will ask you very politely to stop doing that. All right? We all agreed on those rules? Awesome. Come on this way. Let's go inside.
Sweet.
Missile silos did not. Okay, the Atlases had people. So we're going to go in the door, end of the hallway, turn left. And we're going to talk about the 8 people that ran this work buildings. So the guy that lived in the corner here was the facility manager. He's the senior, the soldier, airman that lived in the here was the senior person. He was in charge of the building. He plowed the driveway. He mowed the lawn. He changed the light bulbs. He unplugged the toilets. Those were pretty nice rooms for a single guy back in the Army and the Air Force, because most of us had rooms like this.
He lived here all the
He
time.
lived here 3 days on, and then you were off. Guys were on a 3-day rotation, 72 hours. All right. So the first person was the facility manager.
Furniture, man.
Huh?
Government furniture.
It's worse.
I still see some of this furniture.
Any of the repair crews that had gone out to fix on the missiles, if they were going to be out too late, they would tell them to remain overnight. They would go to the nearest launch control facility and be put up just like it was a hotel. And then the facility manager was the innkeeper. He told them where to sleep, what shift they were eating. So that's one. We had 6 security personnel. They used bedroom number 120 and bedroom number 118. We'll show you one because they're the same. All right. They slept on alternating 12-hour shifts. 2 of them were off duty at a time. You'll notice the windows were painted black. It's hard to sleep during daytime. That's why they painted the windows black. They had their weapons with them, but they didn't sleep with them in the Air Force. They locked them up in a locker right there. All right. You see that orange sign on the door? That sign means that there's weapons stored behind that door. So if there's ever a zombie apocalypse and you need a weapon, go to any federal installation, find a door with that sign on it. That's where the weapons are. There's probably zombies behind it. They may be in a vault, but that's where they're at. So that's 7 people.
How would you get in the vault if there was zombies chasing you?
Liberal application of high explosives. So the 8th person would have been the cook. Cook had his own bedroom, all right? Cook cooked 4 meals per day. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, and midnight rations. Why would we feed people at midnight?
Because you're all hungry.
You guys are good. All right. Come on this way.
We make our children work alternate shifts.
This would have been their latrine, their bathroom. In 1985, the Air Force had started to allow ladies and females to serve on the crews and repair crews. So the cook gave up half his bedroom and the ladies got their own latrine. Awesome.
Cool.
All those buildings were built the same way. All right.
But the food started tasting a little worse at that point.
All the buildings were built the same way, and that was done because if you were transferred between bases or wings, you weren't confused when you got up in the middle of the night to try to find the latrine. Everything was in the same location. The buildings were built pretty bare bones. They were open ceilings, pipes. They had hardboard walls, which is like tempered board. So the crews over years, whatever they get their hands on, they decorated them to their tastes. So some guys got sheetrock, ceiling tiles, wall murals. Okay, this is their day room area where they would have eaten and recreated. The kitchen is over here. Feel free to walk back in there. Most of the food was cooked at Ellsworth Air Force Base, wrapped in foil, frozen, and shipped out here. It was shipped out here under guard, and it was locked in those freezers to the right there. Why would we lock up our food?
Do you need to survive?
No.
Zombies don't actually eat.
No. Actually, the only person upstairs that interfaced with the launch crew was the cook. He cooked for the launch crew. The food had to be secured so nobody could poison or pilfer a camper.
It's the easiest way to
That makes sense.
take out the
Exactly.
people is not the armed guard.
It does, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
They actually really fought this thing.
That's why guys don't
So anyway, if you had a really good cook, he'd embellish the food. If you had a really bad cook, he'd unfraud and hand it to you and say, here. This facility was notorious because they were friends with a farmer to the back out here. There's a rancher back here. He raised chickens, so they bought eggs from him. So this place always had fresh omelets and fresh eggs. So if you keep walking this way. Anybody's ever been in a post office or federal building in the 80s and 90s will recognize the artwork on the wall. All came out of the Unicor Federal Prison Industries.
Battleship.
There's Battleship. The last hit on the board is D9. It was the last missile. They had a little fun with it before they left, obviously. All right. They left their magazines behind. Can somebody read me the headline on the People magazine right there? Huh. All right. That's the January issue of the People magazine. It says Hillary the first 100 days. Bill Clinton was sworn in January '93. That's why that's sitting there. Now this is where they would have slept and they would have worked. Oh, certainly. Just don't cross the line. Just don't touch anything on this set of lines. This is where the crews, the support crews would have slept and worked. The missile crews were never up here. They were only in the security office and down in the launch control center. So before we leave the area where they slept and recreated and go where they work, we're going to talk about something. Let's say you're from Dothan, Alabama, okay? You're going to join the Air Force. They're going to train you to be a security policeman. You're going to do 4 years in the Air Force. When you come home, you're going to be a police officer in Dothan, Alabama for the rest of your career, right? They send you to Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota. It's January. It's 30 degrees below zero. There's a 40-mile-an-hour wind and 3 feet of snow, and I love the look on your face, by the way. Are you rethinking your career choice at this point?
You know, the bad part
Just
is
a little bit.
the Russians in most of Russia, northern part of Russia, actually had it worse.
Yeah, they did. So we'll go into where they work now. So come on this way. Anybody? Any questions?
Interact with these 8 people
No.
up
The
here.
only person that they ever interacted with was the cook. The only people they ever saw was the security manager. Sir? 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 Can you take your hand out of the chair, please? Thank you. I do it too all the time, people.
So you're about to tell us what these people did?
Yeah.
Okay,
They
fine.
cooked and they pulled security. That's what they did. We'll talk about security in here. I've just got a couple people in the way. So there's a sign on the door. What does that sign mean?
Weapons stored.
Here there be weapons. Arr. All right. So everybody, when they came here, would have entered through this door. The support crew would have gone straight through and back to work. That door was normally kept shut. The missile crew would have come through here. Come on in. This is the
I'm
security.
see if I can
office.
stump you now. What's SEC stand for?
Security Control Center. All right. So they would have come in here. They would have pushed this button.
Can't
buzz
stop
down,
that
so
guy.
this door normally would have been closed. It's buzzed open from the launch control center. Okay, these guys did not open it. They would give their codes, which were given them in Ellsworth, to the gentlemen or ladies downstairs. If the codes didn't match, they had to go back to Ellsworth. That's an hour-and-a-half drive. Okay, and there was going to be some problems if you didn't have your codes right. If the codes matched, they'd buzz the door open. These guys would go in, go down, do a handoff with the other crew, and then they would leave. All right. So this was the security. Any questions on that? Am I go too fast? Security manager sat here for 30 years. This chair was manned for 30 years, 24/7. He wasn't in it. His partner was in it. He was in the latrine. There's a phone out on the fence, so they would call in, ask him to come in here. They'd verify their credentials. One of the guards would go out and double check their credentials to be allowed into the facility. He was in charge of that. There are motion detectors at the missile launch facilities. You see, it looks like a white missile looking thing. That lights up downstairs, turns a buzzer on. So if they had a motion detect, they would call up to security. He would send 2 people out in the Peacekeeper armored vehicle to go find out what was going on out there. Okay? That's part of their job. A lot of times it was a bird, a tumbleweed, a swarm of bugs. The funniest one we found on record is over by Spearfish. They have a passion play, and their animals escaped one night, and they got a motion detector. They got out there, and it was two camels using the fence as a scratching post. I would love to hear that radio call. The security guards, that's Peacekeeper. It's actually a Dodge pickup truck underneath there. It's made by Cadillac Gauge. It was heated, air conditioned, it had power steering, none of which worked. It has bucket seats that sit like this, so you can't sit vertically in it. It was horrible to drive, solid rubber tires. They hated it. They actually called it a parade vehicle. They tried to take the regular pickup truck when the security manager wasn't looking. That's how they were supposed to get out there and back pull security. So they would pull random security sweeps around the facility and out at the launch facilities. That's what security did. Also, they had one other job. Now they're defending nuclear weapons, right? Does anybody see any bulletproof glass and or armor here?
Nope.
No, these are regular house windows and regular old wooden walls. All right. So again, normally this door was shut. So their job was to make sure that that door was never opened if the blast door was open downstairs. The blast door was supposed to be open unless they were swapping out the crew or the food picking up their food. That was their job, and they did it. And they had to do it the same way every time. So imagine sitting here for 3 years, staring at that, thinking about Dothan, Alabama, in the snow, but knowing when you ran out to that motion detect that it may not be a bird. It may be a person with bad intentions.
So you keep a TV in here or anything?
Back then they didn't have them. Oh, no, for entertainment? No, these guys were not allowed radio or any entertainment. Communications only. On duty, nothing.
Serious subject.
Very serious subject, security, yes. Yeah. So, any questions about security before we move down to what everybody wants to see? The coolest place in the joint.
The keys.
Well, it's cool because it's 30 people.
So those 7 non-cook people, this was what they did.
The six security people ran this.
Yes.
The facility manager ran the building and the cook cooked.
And then of those 6, they'd go out and see if there was a motion detector. They'd go
Right.
out and see what was happening.
And they
in
had
places.
10 missiles that they were in charge of that they had
And
to
did,
go check
did the
on.
6 include the 2 in the...
No, that was a separate crew. That was the launch control crew. Those were officers.
So they had reception.
They slept downstairs. We'll show you where they slept.
So these 10 missiles.
Yes, ma'am.
How far away?
The closest one is 3 miles away. The farthest one is 11 miles away.
Okay.
They couldn't be any closer than 3 miles because the Soviet nuclear weapon had what they call a circular arrow of probability, which meant it was going to fall within a 4-mile circle. Ours was 900 yards. Okay. And then
Is there-
the units are 400 feet.
Is there a cable network in between all of
Yes,
them?
cable between
Okay.
between this facility and all its 10 missiles, and then between this facility and 4 other facilities.
How deep are those cables?
6 to 8 feet.
Okay, so that should be enough, huh?
Yeah.
So does that same security system alarm if cable is cut?
Interesting.
Yeah, it actually had a pressure sensor in it. It would tell us where it was cut. And go ahead and hop on it over there. And Lowell helped the farmer that cut it because when the airport security guy showed up, it wasn't, hey, by the way, we think you hit your cable with a backhoe. It was, what do you think you're doing?
It's wild.
It was very serious.
I like how they left everything the same.
All
All
We had a
right.
missile in the backyard, and we were goofing around over by my cousins. And I got put over by the MPs. So, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Keep your fingers away from the gates here. It can cut your fingers off if you stick your fingers through the gates. Everything in the military was paid by the lowest bidder. All right, that's a joke we always used to have. And they were obviously labeled by the worst speller. If you look up at the emergency exit, you'll see what I'm talking about. And usually when you made a stencil, you wound up using it on multiple things. So I'd be willing to bet there's elevators all over that say emergency exit. We're going 31 feet down the elevator shaft now. This is not the deepest portion. The deepest portion is actually over the corner here. You start to see a round metal disc. That's a sump pump. The water table here is 21 feet down. You are below the ground water table. Where I grew up, the water table was 8 to 13 feet down. Now the missile silos were 87 feet deep. Do the math.
We're swimming.
They had pumps. All right, so everybody hop out. Stay on the rug, please. I'll get you guys out of here. I have to close the doors. Elevators from top side. Now, the artwork on the wall here to your left would be called glass door art. Now, it was always the same. It got changed over time. I like to tell a little story. Back in the 90s, we have contractors that bid to do the jobs at our malls on the military bases. The Air Force got Domino's, we got Red Robin Pizza. It kind of worked offer to send the second missile for free if your first one's late, right? So this is the atrium. And beyond that yellow line is what we call the no loan zone, two-man concept mandatory. What that means is no one person can be beyond that line by themselves. And they have to stay visually in sight of each other. Okay? So for example, when it was time to feed them, the cook would go to security with the food. Security would buzz down. One guy would stand at the bridges there between the container and the launch control center and the capsule, so he could see the second person getting his food. He'd put his food down and he'd swap spots. They could not be out of sight of each other. The only time they could was after 1985 when they allowed females in the cruise. They actually put a curtain up on the latrine in here. Other than that, it never used to have a curtain. It was always like, hey Fred, what are you doing over there? So that's artwork. Let's talk about how this thing was built. Now, let's talk about the Higgs cable. You want to pass that around? That's Higgs cable. Right? Like I said, it's pressurized, had sensors, and it could tell us where it was cut. We could actually go right to where it was cut. Now, when they destroyed the silos, the farmers didn't really want them to blow them up. They were afraid it would hurt their wells and their water tables. So they asked for some concessions. And one of the concessions, they asked the government to abandon the easements for the cables, which they did, at which point the cable became properties of the farmers, excuse me. In 2004, they started to dig it up. It was worth $10,000 per mile in scrap metal.
Really?
That's with vinyl on it. If they'd taken the rubber out, it would have been worth a lot more because they'd stripped it down. There was 1,700 miles of that.
Lots of copper. A lot of copper.
Why is it? Oh, because the copper, what made it worth so much?
Copper.
Copper.
All right, this is rebar. That's regular half-inch rebar like you use to build your house and your garage and your shopping mall, right? Well, when you build nuclear facilities, you use a little bit heavier rebar. Please do not drop this on your toes, okay? This goes for all hands, a lot of everything.
This is reverb?
That's rebar. Right, so I'm going to pass around a couple pictures for you. One is the silo.
Rebar.
And you can see how many layers are around the silo. And one is actually the launch control facility we're about to enter. So what they'd start off with was looks like a big cough drop lozenge made out of half-inch steel. You guys know what a
difference.
or a Sealand container goes on a train, goes on a truck, goes on a boat. Okay.
People
Some
make
people
a house
call them
out of
conics.
it.
Yep, people call it conics. It's right, shipping containers. So that set one inside of that half of that lozenge, weld the other half shut, and wrap it with rebar, pour 7 feet of concrete around it. So you're actually going to go into this. This is the elevator shaft. This is the atrium we're standing in, and that's what we're going to go into right there. Right? That's got 7 feet of concrete. Those pipes on top of it, that's how the air got in and out. The air was heated and air conditioned upstairs, filtered for nuclear, biological, and chemical contamination, and pumped down here. And it still is to this day. We still use the same system.
So
So we need to-
basically, that place is like the safest place on earth.
Pretty much, yeah. Okay.
Depends
So,
on what your version of safe is. You're also the most trapped person on
the
earth.
blast door weighs 8 tons, 16,000 pounds. It's got handles like jack handles on the inside to pump the bolts shut. It can be opened from the outside. It takes approximately 5 hours. Why do we want it to be able to open from the outside? In case something happens in here, we need to be able to get in there, right? Why do we want it to take a long time? In case anybody managed to get through security, we would like to have some time to respond, right?
But what if it's like an emergency in there?
A really good crew can get it open in 2 hours. But you gotta remember, there's 2 people in there, all right? One of the people should be able to open a door. Okay?
Yeah, so if one person has a heart attack or something, the other person
Can
has
open the door. But both
Heart
people-
attacks aren't catching, well, if you have the worst luck on the planet.
We're gonna walk in there, we're gonna stand on a bridge, all right? There's railings on a bridge, to hold on to the railings. Well, as we go in, you gotta step up about this far, you gotta step up again, and you gotta duck down. You gotta kind of hobbit walk through there, all right? When you get to the other end, don't stand up too fast. Make sure you're clear of the capsule wall, especially if you're wearing a hat, all right? So I'll go in first and show you, we'll just pass the message on down the line so nobody bops their head, all right? But you gotta step up right here, okay? And then step up again, duck on down.
This is hard for me.
Now you're inside the capsule. Whoever thought they'd get down in one of these things?
Never.
Never.
It's never going to happen
Let's
again
get 3 on
either.
each side of the bridge so we can show everybody what's going on in here. All righty. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 6 every time. So, right here, this is the incoming air from upstairs, heated air conditioned, right? Air Force likes their creature comforts, right? That's why their guys got air conditioning. Not sure they needed to keep the computers cold. This is the exhaust where it went out. Anybody that's taller can see right there. It says AMF. That's the same people build your bowling machines and Harley Davidson motorcycles from the 70s or early 80s. Right? You'll notice that this is all half-inch steel, all welded together. Looks like a big cough lozenge. See how it's all curved around? If you look over the side here, you see the curves that goes underneath this.
When did those things go
Those hooks right there for lifting up different pieces of equipment. If one of these was to break, they'd have to winch it up out of here. Now, you know what this is? Now, if you guys look up here, you'll see some large green, yeah, it's a piston. See those green chain links up there? There's some on this side for you folks. Just follow it up. You'll see these large green chain links right there. The Navy guys like to call that anchor chain. The Air Force calls it shock isolators.
Oh,
this
wow.
unit has pistons on each end. These are high pressure pistons, okay? It's floating.
Impact.
It's floating to prevent impact shock, all right?
Oh, wow.
Right now we don't have it floating because it'd be just doing this with this many people, and it's actually braced for us. So the outer container could move 2 feet. The inner container would move 1 inch.
Yeah. Concussion. Could knock him out.
Concussion. Now, we're going to go into launch control center.
I'm guessing they tested these systems. Oh, sorry.
Constantly tested those systems.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to go into the launch control center. When we go in, I'm going to have you stay on the carpet on this side, okay? As you go in, I'm going to stand on top of these edges of these tracks right here. They can cut through your shoes, so don't stab your toes into them, all right? I can't be at the other end at the same time. There's some more down there. As you file in, notice everything's strapped down, including the coffee pot. Don't forget to check out the toilet right here, right? All right, you're now in the launch control center. This is where we did our day-to-day business. Go ahead and file on in. We'll be in here for a few minutes. You'll be able to get plenty of pictures.
Why is everything strapped down?
In case it got hit hard enough to rock it. And if it wasn't strapped down, it could become a weapon. The mattress was strapped down because if it flew out, it could knock the deputy commander out and he would not be able to complete his mission. So the deputy commander's chair was here. The commander's chair was on that end. What time was your tour?
1:15.
Oh, I'm like, wow, man, I'm really slow today. Thought it started at 1. All right. So anyway, this would have been their communication system. These are teletypewriters. If you've ever heard the term teletypewriter, they would have got their warning orders on paper. They would have got their warning order. They would have opened the box. What's in the box?
Launch codes.
The launch codes, the cookie, the enable code, and the launch keys. They would enter the launch code on this panel right here. This is the enable panel. If you notice there's a rotary phone knob here and a phone there. There's one on the commander's chair also. They would then have a conference call with the other flights to determine whether they had a valid launch order. If they did, one of the other flights would be their backup. And when I say backup, I'm going to explain this because it sounds a little crazy. How many keys did it take to launch a missile?
2.
4.
4.
Everybody thinks it's 2. It's
I thought
4.
so.
The other ones would turn their keys and then verifying we had a valid launch, and then our keys would launch. If we decided to stick our keys in one day, nothing would happen.
Gotcha.
But somebody might have to come open a door and have a little talk with us, right?
Right.
Okay? Because the keys were trapped. Once you stuck them in, they didn't come out. They were also sealed. You see that white and red, or excuse me, that white and blue seal right there? You'll note on top of that blue plastic thing, you'll notice that all these drawers had seals on them. So the first thing you did when you came in is make sure all those seals were intact, nobody was monkeying with it. Right? I'm gonna sneak past you real quick. Thank you. All right, so this is the computer that ran all the missiles. Okay? You notice this drawer right here says secret crypto. Behind that drawer is an 8-inch floppy disk. You saw that news article a couple months ago that talked about all this antique computer equipment. These are still in use in the Minuteman III fields. It's completely unhackable. Nobody knows the machine language anymore, and they can't get the floppy disks. It doesn't touch the internet. Your smartphone has 10,000 times the computing power, but it's hackable. So, a couple of things we'll go over. Deputy Commander's key went right here. Commander's key went right here. Okay? Everybody wants to know where the keys went for some strange reason. Scariest light in the whole place is this green light right here. You get down there and take a picture, you'll realize it says indicator missile away. If that light is on and green, you have launched a missile. Yep. Okay. So
if it didn't turn green and you were expecting it to turn green,
yeah,
something failed.
then you would, well, if you had a problem with a missile, like a generator out there went bad or a sump pump went bad, the light would pop up on here. If you had a launch ignition failure, then it would show up over here on the commander's console. Now, notice the commander had a mirror so he could see what the deputy commander was doing, tell him he needed a haircut. They were allowed to sleep. They had to take turns at it. They couldn't both be asleep. You ever see the movie where the guy's calling, says, "This is SAC Sync NORAD calling"? Terminator or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
They got that message just came in verbally on these two radios right here. For entertainment, they had TV set. Who had the remote control? Facility manager.
Oh.
Never upset the sergeant. The other source of entertainment was an AM/FM cassette stereo in the corner.
Oh, wow.
There is an escape hatch they could get out over here. We don't show it anymore. too many people were tripping trying to get back and see it. There is a week's worth of water and food under the floor. No gas masks or radiation or chemical suits. There's 8 hours of batteries underneath the floor over here. And a week's worth of air in here. There's a manual thing back here called a stripper that strips the CO2 out. They could crank it and purify their air.
Oh, nice.
So remember that safest place in the world? Oh, you know that safest place in the world you just talked about? It has 8 hours of air.
Yeah.
So
They
any
did
questions?
3-day shifts?
I'm sorry?
3-day
They did
shifts?
a 24-hour shift 8 times per month.
Oh my God.
your safest place in the world.
Very
also
stressful. When they
one
weren't
best
here,
team.
they were in the simulator over at Ellsworth getting tested, doing alerts. You never did alerts down here. You never play with real weapons. They would say, I would push this button, I would turn that key. They wouldn't actually do it. Now, a couple of good things. This was usually a young lieutenant. They were offered college degrees, all right, master's degrees from local universities. A lot of college degrees got earned right there. I had a gentleman that said, I got a degree in economics from such and such university. He says, I get alumni letters all the time asking for money, and I've never set foot on their campus. He earned it at that chair.
Like, did he actually do the schoolwork?
Yes, he did right there at that chair.
How did he get the schoolwork? If
He
was
brought it
like-
with him. They mailed it. Back in the day, they used to mail order. We didn't have internet back then. So they would mail you the schoolwork. It's called correspondence courses.
Yeah,
She's
yeah.
probably wondering how they
That was
survived.
free.
Doesn't it walk
Mail?
We got away. You guys could swap around, take pictures. Does anybody have any questions?
Oh man.
So this chair
He could slide back and forth. His job was to check everything on this line. His job was to run that panel and make sure he did his job.
But that chair only went straight back and
Yes,
forth
ma'am.
on that line.
That's it.
Okay.
They were only in the chair when they had a warning order, or because usually we weren't planning on starting the thing. Okay, so if we detected missiles coming at us, they would strap in, because the time it was supposed to take to get the missiles out of here. If we happened to not catch the missiles coming at us right away, we didn't want to get knocked out of our chairs and not be able to send our missiles back. That's why they were strapped into the chairs.
How do they get out of the chair? Doesn't it?
It's got levers on the other side. You can move it forward, back and forth, up and down, tip it back. They could kind of lean back in the chair.
If they weren't sitting in this chair or sleeping,
Yeah.
where were they? There's not really any
In the chair,
place
they
to
usually swivel the chairs out and just lean back in.
Okay.
But if there was a valid launch order or an alert
They would-
or a warning, they would turn and lock in. Yeah,
Wow.
that way they didn't become projectiles in the container.
So you say there's a security, there's an escape. You don't have to show. I guess.
You can't see it from in here. They covered it up. There's a manhole cover up in the corner there,
Okay.
and it's got 4 chains on it, and it goes up a tube, and it's full of sand. There's a ladder in there welded on a shovel at the top. It's about 3 feet below ground. So what they would do is they'd unscrew the clamp, the manhole cover would fly at them, the chains would stop it. The sand would fall between the container and the capsule, and then when it was done, they could unbolt the chains, climb up the ladder, and dig out the last 2 or 3 feet. All right. What they found is they've destroyed these things. Is they're all collapsed. The frost, the ground freeze and crushed them. So yeah, they couldn't really have got out. So we got about
Bummer.
2.5 more minutes. So
So if they didn't
It's a
escape, they
clock.
wouldn't have been.
It's the only thing, the only thing I recognize in here. Yeah, I'm looking for clocks like that. It's so hard to find them. Most of them are Russian, actually.
24-hour clock.
Yeah.
So all of these launch control facilities, except